Loving this person that you're talking to is loving parts of yourself.
When I say I love you, who's the I that is actually being addressed? The I that is using my body to capture this experience is the one that's truly being touched.
And I often give people compliments. Simon, like, I can't believe you ran 10 kilometers with zero training. That's so freaking amazing. My friend is like, Andy, you say things, but you're pretty cool yourself.
I will never notice something in another unless it's recognized as being a part of my own experience.
Do people have unique purpose, and why is that something you should look for?
I think it's impossible for people to not live and express their purpose. They may not know that they're doing it at any given point in time, but when they are fully alive, they are by definition expressing their purpose in life. This is a meditation that I actually will use sometimes. I'm sitting on this point on an island, watching the river of life go by and noticing the things in my life as they float by without attaching or giving significance to them. At some point, I will just pop. At some point, it just now, okay. Hello, Andy.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. How's the weather where you're currently based, Blaine?
It's it's a little drizzly and rainy here today, but not too bad. Autumn is coming for sure.
Are you on the East Coast or the West Coast of America?
West Coast. I'm in Seattle.
Oh, okay. So it's probably you guys, it's warmer than the East Coast, most likely.
Yeah, it kind of depends on weather patterns, but right now I think Philadelphia is about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's about 70 here. So
Oh, colder.
yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today, Blaine.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yes. Now, where are you at?
I'm in Sydney, Australia.
In Sydney. Ah, I used to live up in Brisbane.
Oh, really? How long ago?
Oh goodness, that would have been 87, I think, 87, 88.
Wow. And how long were you in Brisbane for?
I lived there just a bit longer than a year.
And were you here for work? Were you testing the waters?
I was managing partner of a consultancy, and there were three partners. I was one of them, and I spent that entire year keeping the other two partners from killing each other. So it was an interesting experience.
And then what happened at the end of the year? Were you successful at keeping
Oh
them?
yeah, they didn't kill each other, but I decided I didn't need the stress, so I came back to the States.
Have you worked or lived in other countries around the
Yeah.
world?
Oh, yeah. I've worked all over the world. Yeah. Yeah.
Did it?
I ran Nokia's global leadership initiative projects or programs for about 12 years. So I was in Finland, I was in Hong Kong, I was in Australia, Japan. Yeah, I mean, literally everywhere.
Did
I went to
you?
school. Yeah, I went to school in Europe.
Huh.
So I
Did you
lived in Europe.
did you have children while you were sort of working abroad?
Mm. Not with me, no. Um, the kids stayed at home. Yeah,
How?
I just traveled a lot. Uh, yeah, I had a consultancy, and we ended up with I built out the company. We had offices in four countries at one point in time. So I was traveling all over the place.
Huh. How did you go about? We're sort of already jumping into it, or we've been recording the whole time. But how do you go about balancing family life while traveling around the world for work, Blaine?
Balance is an interesting concept because just by the nature of the word, balance requires everything to be still. I mean, there's no movement if there's balance.
Mm.
So the challenge is how do you modulate the back and forth? Sometimes you go too heavy on one side and you need to come back, and so there's always this oscillation that's in place. And that's, I think, the fallacy of trying to balance, my life is it's always going to be out of balance if I'm actually looking to be successful, either personally or professionally. There's always going to be a trade-off that's kind of going back and forth.
Interesting. And is the center point consistent, or does that also move throughout time?
The center point can move depending on, I mean, if I use the center point as as a metaphor for a values core. As I grow and as I learn, as I become more experienced, or I have more experience, I begin to question more, and what was a center, if you will, now has shifted a bit. And that's also a function, I think, of just growing older. What I valued in my 20s is different than what I value today. It certainly was different than what I valued in my 40s. So that center point tends to move. And I organize my life around that moving center point.
With your current values, if you were able to travel back in time and talk to your 20-year-old self, would you have wanted to try to share and have 20-year-old you take on your current values? Or do you feel like each value was needed at that time and age?
I wouldn't change anything. Honestly, Andy, I would not change anything. Um, the values that they were immature in many ways when I was in my 20s, and they were influenced a lot by external uh, noticings, other people's, assessments of what it took to be or what it meant to be successful. I hadn't really developed the capacity at that point in time to really begin to question for myself, what does it mean to be successful? Um, for Blaine, yeah, I knew what it meant to be successful for my, yeah, fill in the blank, my peers or my society or whatever it might have been. But at a point in time, there was a discord, and it's kind of like, okay, I need to examine this, and that wouldn't have happened in my 20s. I had to go through kind of the process.
So, for example, I'm 25 years old, or let's say you're talking to one of your children, Blaine. Would you be advising me your current values, or would you try to envision 25-year-old Blaine and share values or advice to me that way?
I would do the latter because you have to go. I mean, I'm 75. I just turned 75. And so I've got 50 years on you. And for me to counsel you, coach you, or mentor you from a 75-year-old mindset, I have experience and I can see things. I know what might lie ahead of you. But you have to have the experience in order for it to integrate into who you are. And it's that integration that's important. Yeah, and it's impossible for somebody to integrate something into their beingness if they don't experience it themselves.
75, you look very, very young for 75. Do you have any morning routines or diet? Like, not only do you look young, but you're sort of really clear and you're listening and you're talking as if you're sort of 40 years old.
Well, thank you. No, I work with a personal trainer. I work out every morning, meditate. I've been meditating since the early 70s. Um, and I do a lot of reading and a lot of studying in the morning. And yeah, I live on 11 acres of land here on an island. So I've got wildlife everywhere. I've got a lot of nature, and I'm in nature quite a bit.
At your current sort of chapter, Blaine, what has been your main focus over the last 6 months?
Oh my goodness. The last 6 months. Well, a couple of things come into play here. One is this book that you may see over my shoulder here, Compassionate Capitalism. Um, just bringing that more and more, the consciousness that informs what conscious capitalism or compassionate capitalism is, bringing that into the marketplace. So that's professionally what I'm really up to right now. My lectures, my writings, everything is organized around compassionate capitalism. Um, and the other part of it is more personal. My wife is experiencing some significant health challenges right now. So yeah, I'm just doing what we need to do to kind of be present with each other and navigate the whole healthcare uh, and the wellness journey back to where she needs to be.
How I first came across you, Blaine, was I was a big fan of David Meltzer. So through that, I got sort of read the book Compassionate Capitalism. I read it a year ago, and then you're the co-author. So then I put you on the Excel list of guests that I wanted to have on the show. So that's a bit of context how I first came across you, Blaine. Please tell us more about the book, like sort of top of mind if I'm sort of trying to recall what it was about when I read it a year ago, sort of the things that come to top of mind. It's sort of like a book about sort of doing business with compassion, with kindness, and how that can actually lead to you making money. I feel like I don't know if I got it wrong and my memory is wrong, but that's sort of what I think of.
That's pretty accurate. There, yeah, David and I have been partners for a long time. And I started writing the book Compassionate Capitalism before I actually met David. And it was a concept that I'd had. And part of it came out of conversations I had with John Mackey, who was the co-founder of Whole Foods, and a fellow by the name of Raj Sisodia, who is a professor of business at Babson College on the East Coast here in the States. And Raj and John wrote a book that was a bestseller called Conscious Capitalism. And the idea there was you can begin to expand if your thinking begins to expand around who the stakeholders are of a business. And the conscious capitalism model was an invitation to expand the thinking that you have about stakeholders. So moving beyond just the shareholder group, the ones that had equity in the business. And yeah, John and Raj both said, okay, there's greater stakeholders that are involved here. You've got employees, obviously, you've got suppliers, obviously, but you also have a community in which the business lives. So those concentric rings kind of rippled out. So that was their model. That was kind of the thinking that went into setting that up. And in conversations I had with both of them over dinner separately, I said, for me, I love the model, and there's a piece that seems to be missing for me. And that piece that was missing had to do with what I came to call compassion. And it has to, compassion is for me the behavioral analog of consciousness. So it's one thing to recognize that I have greater stakeholders involved in my business and what most people would typically envision. It's another thing to behave as if those stakeholders make a difference, that behave as if they matter to the success of my business. And it's that behavior that I was interested in. And when you start looking at compassion is it's not soft and fuzzy. People think of compassion as just, oh, it's kind of, yeah, sort of a thing that, it doesn't belong in the business world. We've got decisions to make, we've got money to make, we've got, that. Now, compassion has to do with connection. And this is where for me, the rubber kind of meets the road, the tire meets the road here. It's recognizing that there is connection and then behaving in alliance with and in fidelity with the recognition that that connection is important, that I am connected. And because I'm connected, what happens to you actually is happening to me as well, because I am connected. The valuing of you becomes important because there's a reciprocity involved in it. If you're feeling as if you're able to win, you're able to feel better about yourself and your family as a consequence of being touched by my service or my product, you're going to beat a path to my door. You're going to keep coming back. There's that reciprocity that comes into play here. So when we're looking at compassion as a business model, what it speaks to is just literally the notion that how do people feel about themselves when they're in the presence of your product or service? If they feel uplifted, if they feel as if they've got an opportunity to be better, they're going to continue to purchase. They're going to continue to come. And that makes all the difference in the world. I don't have to sell them. All I have to do is allow them to experience being uplifted. And that feeds into, Andy, it feeds into what I think is the purpose of business. The purpose of business is not to make money. That's not the purpose of business. The purpose of business is to uplift the experience of being alive on this planet for everything that the business touches. And if the business is doing that well, you're going to be successful. If you are uplifting the experience, the possibility of feeling alive, of being alive on this planet, you're going to keep coming back to what it is that gave you that experience, which is going to be your service or your product. And that's where compassion comes into play.
Interesting. Blaine, how would you use compassion to market and sell your book about compassion?
How do I use compassion? Yeah, in the conversations that I have, like this conversation that we're having, one of the things that I envision, how are you going to experience yourself as a consequence of us having this conversation? Hopefully, what will happen is you will walk away inspired, which is different than motivated. There will be something that gets touched in you that you go at the end of the conversation, you go, wow, that was worth having. I spent this time, I invested this time, and I got something out of this that has allowed me to feel more alive. At least it's allowed me to question more of what I'm doing. And when that happens, compassion has, moved into play because in order for me to do that successfully, I have to connect with you. It can't be a drive-by conversation. It has to be one in which I'm actually engaging. And I can do that as a storefront. I can do that in a webinar. I can do that in any number of different ways. But if a business is doing that well, if the people in the business are doing that well, the frontline clerks, the salespeople, yeah, there's a restaurant here on the island that is my wife's and my favorite restaurant, and I absolutely love the service people. And they love serving us. I mean, we call up for a reservation, and they kind of fight to have who's gonna who's going to serve us. Yeah, they walk away feeling uplifted. And they are the ones that are serving us, but they feel uplifted because we've interacted with them in a certain way. I mentioned my wife having some health challenges right now. Um, the surgeons, the nurses, they comment about how uplifted they feel when they're with her. And I mean, that's compassion. That's where compassion is. And it requires a certain rigor in order to do that. You have to there's a certain discipline and a rigor, and it's, you move outside of yourself and you actually begin to treat the other as an aspect of yourself. You're an aspect of me. So how can I interact with me in a way that allows for us to thrive? Now, that's very heady, but it has a lot of practical applications when it comes to business.
Interesting. I'm often going into group settings, whether it's a run club, a friend's 25th birthday, a friend's dinner, and I sort of go around the room and I chat with each individual and I try to practice compassion. I try to, tell me about that new job that you just got. Tell me what's those little gibbets that you have on your shoes. That's really cool. Last time we talked, you talked about quitting your job. Where are you at now? So having these one-on-one sort of chats and really trying to make the person feel seen. And then as I'm working my way around the room, by the end of the night, driving home, the feeling I have is like I felt lonely despite being in a room surrounded by nice and kind friends or peers. Any advice there, Blaine?
Yeah. What's missing there, if there's anything that I could label as missing, is you're giving things away. Your questions, your concern, you're paying attention. My question to you would be, how much do you receive? How much are you letting in? How open are you for people to connect with you? You're connecting with them, but are you allowing them to connect with you? An old mentor of mine years ago said that people will connect through vulnerability. It's the only way that we connect with another person is through vulnerability. And vulnerability requires a risk. There's an openness. So there has to be an access. So we connect through vulnerability and we disconnect through certainty. And certainty does not puts up a veneer. People can't get past that facade of certainty. I know what I'm doing. I've got things put together here. Yeah, my life is good. Um, you mean all of those, sort of things that people will imagine that they're supposed to be presenting out in public? No, I'm vulnerable. I want to be able to be vulnerable. And another word for that is authentic. And authenticity requires vulnerability. Authenticity requires an ability to say, yeah, I'm kind of lost here right now. I'm not sure what's going on. So in the setting that you're describing, maybe having a conversation with somebody, if it's somebody that saying, these kinds of settings, I sometimes feel a little lost. And what I'd like to do is, have a different experience. Do you have any suggestions about how I might go about doing that? And now that question requires vulnerability. Yeah. And it's basically a declaration of, I don't have it all put together here.
Something
Like
I've
David, you mentioned David. David does that very well. He connects very well with people. And a large part of it has to do with vulnerability. The stories that he tells, uh, the classic one is I lost $100 million, but it's more than that. It's just kind of conversations that he has with Julie, his wife. Yeah, and yeah. So he's she told me she was going to leave me if I didn't get my act together. Uh, it's kind of, and people can identify with that. They resonate with that, and they come close to him as a consequence of that. And that's something that I learned 50 years ago. Yeah, to be able to do some of that stuff. So this is where the value core starts to move a little bit. And so how I position myself, how I present myself, and how I interact begins to shift along with that.
Something I've tried for the very first time last week. A friend invited me to church. The first time going to church and seeing a sermon, everyone was nice. Everyone sort of wanted to know who I was, and I talked to all the sort of, maybe there were like maybe 20, 30 people there, and sort of I did my same routine, worked my way around the room, talked to people. And by the end, they were like, hey, we're all going to grab some dinner after. Do you want to come with? And this is the first time I sort of did something like this where I was like, I think I might pass, because usually in those settings, I feel quite isolated. Sort of like, even though I'm surrounded by people, for whatever reason it is, I feel pretty isolated. And by the time I'm driving home alone, there's a massive dip, and I feel down and out. So I think I might probably just call it an early night and just drive home. And obviously they're like, no, you already know Brian, like, Natasha, like, you'll be fine, like, we'll be there with you. And I think if they pushed a bit harder, I might have went along with them, but I think they sort of stopped then and there. So that's something I tried for the first time, and it reminded me of what you just shared about the conversations in the room, saying, hey, like, in these settings, I feel quite lonely. Do you have any advice? I don't know if that's the same metaphor or the same approach.
Yeah, similar. And the aspect of letting them in has to do, in this case, with saying yes. Yeah. So when they say, no, yeah, you know Brian over here, Natasha, you come with us, you're going to be fine. And rather than saying, nah, you say, okay, I will. And then you connect with Natasha, or you connect with Brian, and just have that be kind of a focal conversation, at least initially, yeah, when you go to dinner, and just kind of see what evolves without putting a whole lot of pressure on yourself to be social. Just kind of, how, I mean, it's like this, how to have a conversation. And then you just, we just kind of, riff and see where we end up.
Something I wrote down this morning on my phone was that when having a conversation with, a sort of child, I'm not expecting to be heard. I'm not expecting to be seen. I'm not expecting to be understood. I'm just having fun talking to this child.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, I have set expectations when talking to adults, or I'm craving or wanting those things. And I guess the reason I wrote it down was that I should sort of just have fun talking to people and have no expectations, as if I was talking to a child. I guess that doesn't sound nice, but I guess the moral is like, I'm setting expectations maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of what goes on there. And I think you hit pretty accurately what's going on here. With the child, you have no expectation. So there's spontaneity, there's vulnerability, there's authenticity. And when you move into the adult domain, now you've got a should that's usually creeping into play. I'm supposed to do it this way. I'm supposed to be this kind of a person. Yeah, I mean, all of those sorts of modelings begin to show up, and authenticity goes out the door, and vulnerability starts to close off, and then you're left with what you're left with, which is, I don't feel connected.
Blaine, how do you go about recharging, being a super compassionate person and a giving person? How do you go about recharging your battery, or is the battery always full and it doesn't drain?
Oh no, 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 the battery's not always full. Um, for me, reading is part of it. I recharge best when I have the opportunity to be quiet. My wife is the opposite. She recharges when she's around people. But I'll take a walk in nature. Go walk the seashore, play with the dogs. That's one way that we've got two small little Pomeranians, and so I'll just play with them. And there's no expectations, and they're always, they keep coming back to me. So it's kind of like, there's energy that comes to me, which is a great way of recharging. So, things like that. I mean, when I was younger, I'm a sportsman. I mean, I scuba dive, I ski, I'm a pilot. So I would do a lot of different sorts of things, fish. I mean, one of the ways that I traditionally would recharge is I just go fishing, oftentimes just by myself, but just to get away, breathe some fresh air, and not have any to-do list to pay attention to.
Did you schedule in your fishing trips and like have a day every week that you went fishing, or was it if you felt like you needed to recharge or you felt down and out, you would take the day off and go fishing? How did you sort of fit in recharging activities? Was it routinely or was it based on the moment?
It was kind of based on the moment. Now that's not to say, I mean, I would, for a number of years, I had an annual fishing trip that I would take some friends up to Alaska, and we would fish some big fish up in Alaska, which was great fun. But some of the other kinds of fishing, I just, grab my fly rod and my pontoon boat, and I'd just go to I mean, it's kind of, okay, I've got a gap of time today. I'm not doing anything. I'm going to go fishing, sort of a thing. And I would do it that way typically. So some of it was scheduled, some of it was just ad hoc.
During periods of sort of drought or tough periods during your business, with, well, I guess to share my scenario, our company has been bleeding out for the last 2 years. I think over the last probably 2, 3 months, we've like run out of money. So each month I've been trying to figure out how to just make payroll just by the end of the month. And I think I've been just working every single day for the last 2, 3 months. And I would go out or spend the day out if someone invited me to hang out or they wanted to catch up with me. And that would be my sort of leisure time. And I remember a friend asking, like, when's the last time you've done something on your own? And I was like, it's been quite a long time. I used to always go on a hike on my own, take the day off. I used to do things on my own quite consistently, but I think I had breathing room to do so. And now I feel like I don't have breathing room, but I don't know if it's ironically making things worse, where like now because things are bad, this is when I should be taking sort of days off to recharge, or if I'm doing the right thing and working every day.
Well, here's the thought on that. When things get tough, I'm just describing the business here. Um, the physiological reaction is contraction. So focus narrows. All of a sudden the days get long. I'm spending 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours a day at the office. My head is down, it's not up, I'm not looking around. So that contraction physiology, there's an energetic signature to it that is um, translated into how the business is functioning, and the business begins to become a contractive experience. So one way that you can begin to shift that is literally physiologically on your side. Get your head up, expand your chest. You walk outside. You're coming into, let's see, this is September here, so you're coming into spring right now. Um, yeah, just take a walk and watch new life begin to emerge. See a bud on a tree. And just as a metaphor, but you tap into the energy of expression. You tap into the energy of expansion. And then you bring that back into the office. And part of what happens with this, Andy, is you begin to become more creative. When you're contractive, a large part of the concentration, a large part of the focus is how do I get out of this situation? And it's almost always past oriented. What have I done before that got me out of this? What have I done before? So, yeah, we kind of keep going back to the same trough. Maybe if I just do this a little bit different this time, a little bit harder this time, a little bit twist on this time. No, I want to be inventive. I want to do something different. If I was starting the business brand new right now, what would I do? How would I do it differently? And use nature as kind of a guidance system, if you will. What excites me? What, yeah, what would I love? That's a question that always comes, it's an intriguing question. What would I love? What would my people love right now? Not what do we think we're supposed to do, but what would I love? How would that show up in the way that we do our business? What would I love? What would my customers love from me, from us? What would my customers love? And you've probably got an avatar of some sort that is your perfect client. What would they love? What would he or she love to have from you, from the business, that would have them feel, wow, this is great? And then go about making that happen.
Interesting. Blaine, how do you know if you're sort of on the right path? Like, for example, how do I know if I focus on my YouTube channel, create more valuable content, that's going to bring a influx of warm organic leads, or if I should put in more effort with engaging my current list of 2,000-3,000 leads that sort of know who I am, or if I should take the day off and think of a completely new strategy.
There's nothing to be said for doing only one at the neglect of the others. The only constraint that you might have there will be bandwidth at this point. But um, you've got a warm audience, warm client base. So whatever your nurture sequence is there, you will probably want to leverage that, or kind of enhance that a little bit. Bring a new offer to them. Maybe do a poll. Yeah, you know me well. What would you like to see from us that we haven't been offering to you? I mean, just that's a vulnerable question, and it gives them a way to connect with you in a way that they probably haven't before. And then with your YouTube channel, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting question because I think I've got about 300 videos up on my YouTube channel, but I've never curated it. I've never done anything with it. And I'm starting to think right now, man, maybe I should do something with that because it's an underutilized asset for sure. And it would be something that I could probably do something with. But I've never really paid much attention to it. But I mean, if that's something that is serving you well, YouTube is a great channel for bringing in new business, certainly for building a list and that sort of thing. And then just kind of go out in nature and walk around and just kind of take the blinders off. It's kind of what would I love? What would I love? What haven't we considered? If a competitor was to start a business right now that was directly competing with me, what would they do?
I love
Yeah,
that.
what would a competitor do? A new what would a new competitor do that I'm not doing that would take and make me obsolete? And then I do that.
I love that question that you just asked yourself, Blaine. Do you have a list of few questions that you routinely ask yourself at different chapters of either your life or business?
Not a formal list. No, I've just over the years learned to ask questions. Yeah.
If there's like a business owner, or I guess me, listening to this, and they're sort of in a tough place, they're trying to figure things out, what are, I guess, three questions you would recommend that person to ask themselves? I guess I really love the first question of, if a competitor came into the market and made you obsolete, what would that competitor be doing? That's an amazing question.
Yeah. So start with that one. The second one would be, and this is an interesting one for me. And what's my economic engine? And by that I mean, and think about this for just a moment. Uh, Apple, as an example here. Apple, most people think of as a computer company, but Apple does not sell computers. Okay, now, and I'm talking about here the iPhone as well. I mean, this is a computer. Yeah, make no mistake about that. But what the economic engine of Apple is, and this is what differentiates them from Microsoft, it differentiates them from Dell, from Hewlett Packard, I mean, from anybody else that makes hardware, is experience. Their economic engine is the customer experience. This iPhone it's a portal. It's a gateway to experience. And this was the brilliance of the App Store. It's a gateway to an experience. And that experience is it's kind of like, oh God, I feel so cool about me because I now have access to this through this app. The phone, I almost never make phone calls on this thing. Now I do make phone calls, but it serves such greater utility. It's the economic engine, and this is why Apple became the first $1 trillion company, is the user experience. Steve Jobs was fanatical about paying attention to the end user experience. And that's their economic engine. It's not selling hardware. It's not even selling software. It's the user experience. So the question that I would ask is, as a business, what's your economic engine that is a differentiator that nobody else replicates? What's your economic engine? How do you make money? You don't make money, in Apple's case, you don't make money by selling phones. Now you do make money, obviously, but the way you make the sale of the phone is because the end user experience is so enticing. How do people feel about themselves when they're in the presence of your product? That's what you want to, in this case, leverage. When the iPhone came out, I was doing a lot of work with Nokia at the time, and Nokia was the big phone company at that point in time. I got an iPhone. I have still got the box that my first iPhone came in because I was so gobsmacked by the beauty of the box design, the packaging. It's kind of it's kind of like I felt like a kid at Christmas. What's in here? The design of the box, the user experience. And I actually, still get kind of chills when I start thinking about that. The attention to that end user experience was absolutely crucial and is absolutely crucial to Apple's success. And I just use them as an example. There's a number of other companies that are, paying attention to things in that way as well. But, when you think about economic engine, how do you make money? You don't make money by selling stuff. You make money by something else that enables the sale to happen.
Is it something you could apply to all businesses where all the top companies, they just really take a customer-centric approach? Amazon's trying to give the customers the lowest prices, the most selections. Tesla's trying to give customers the most amazing car that looks beautiful. I guess is the root of this just really focusing on giving the customer the best experience possible with whatever product you may be selling? Or is it more nuanced?
At the B2C level, that's exactly what's going on. But in a greater sense, that's where compassionate capitalism comes in again. It's giving all of the stakeholders that are impacted by the business's activities the experience. So how do my suppliers feel? Do they feel uplifted when they sign the contract with me, or do they feel taken advantage of? The whole notion of, well, I left money on the table. Great, leave money on the table. Let them win. I mean, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum process. And then the same would be true with my employees, my community. How do I steward resources in my community? How do we dispose of things? Is it done in a way that allows for something greater to happen? Or is it destructive? I mean, microplastics is a great example of this. We start thinking in these terms, and this is where, compassion has a very hard edge to it. When I start thinking that everything is connected, I start I start making decisions in service of honoring that connection. So the idea of disposability begins to go out the window, and recyclability starts to, come into play, even though it may be more expensive to do it. Okay, the cost, I'm going to have to pay, as a business, I'll have to pay more to go green. Okay, I pay more to go green. That'll be offset in some other ways. But these are hard decisions that get made, and how they get made makes a difference.
How do you apply compassion to sales, Blaine? When you're sort of doing sales, you can have the approach of allowing the customer to come to a decision, no pressure, but then you could also take the approach of objection handling, helping them deal with their fears, helping them realize like, hey, the reason why you want to talk to your partner is because you want to put the responsibility on her and sort of guide him to the sales and be a bit more, I guess, pressury. Or you can let him just talk to his partner, and then in a week's time, he doesn't show up to the follow-up call because he's changed his mind.
Yeah. Uh, the sales cycle, and that's essentially what we're talking about here, requires professional curation, I guess would be the way that I would think about that. Yeah, I'm not going to just, put my offer out there and go, okay, now you get to choose, or you make a decision. Let me know when you made the decision. That's not the way that it works, ideally. The way it works is I want to find out what is your need before I even begin to offer you what it is I think I'm going to offer you. An example of this, I used to sell, this goes way back, in the 1980s, I think it was. I was, I was a licensed broker, securities broker, or security salesman. And I was selling a pension fund on a product that we had. And, we were looking at about, at this point in time, what I wanted from them was $100,000 buy. And it was a pension fund. So it was other people's money and there was a fiduciary responsibility on the part of the person that I was speaking to. I talked him into the sale and out of the sale 5 times. I talked him into the sale, and he said yes. And I said, and okay, hold on now. You just said yes. Have we covered everything? There's a piece here that I don't think that we actually addressed well. And he went, oh, I hadn't thought about that. So he backed up, and we got that one handled. So in the course of that conversation, I was able to uncover literally just about everything of his concern. But had I not uncovered it, he would have bought at the first one, and then questioned, was this really a good decision on my part? Because we never addressed these other four areas. And he would have, probably figured it out himself. But I wanted to be able to have a relationship with him long term, and not just have him feel as if he got taken advantage of because it was a quick sale. So I talked him into and out of the sale 5 times. And the last time I closed it, it was $100 sale, or $100,000 sale. And I was fine on him not buying. And this was really the key on this. Was I was fine. I was literally fine if he ended up saying no, because I know that he now felt as if I had heard his concerns and I was paying attention to what his needs were. So if it wasn't going to be this product, that was going to be fine. I've now got a relationship that I can come back to. And everything is organized around relationships. That's everything operates out of fidelity to relationship fidelity. And if relationships are working well, you've got a pretty good shot at being successful long term.
When it comes to coaching, I know David Meltzer does a lot of coaching. When it comes to consulting for clients, you probably often come across people or businesses that that right off the bat, there's a good chance that you can give them the blueprint, the recipe, but they just don't have the capacity to go ahead and implement it. You can convince them to get the sale, but they're not gonna get the results. And I guess, if you sell 100 books, I think there's a stat where it says only 10 people would get through the first half of the book or something. And it's just sort of like, is it just part of a numbers game? Or is there a way where you can sort of use compassion and help because now these clients, they're just going to feel guilty about the purchase they've made, that, and now they haven't applied the advice that you've given them, and now both sides feel bad.
Yeah, that's that's the problem with these packaged, if you will, packaged training programs, packaged developmental programs. They will work for some people. There was no question about that. I mean, and those types of people tend to be the ones that have a strong desire for a certain outcome, and they're willing to do the diligent work necessary to make it happen. A lot of people, and the vast majority of people, they get hooked in on the promise on the front end, and then they recognize how difficult it's going to be to try and keep themselves going. And what happens? I mean, think about this in the context of New Year's Eve resolutions. Yeah, you make a resolution on New Year's Eve, uh, whatever that resolution may be. And in 45 days, you've forgotten all about it, because what we're talking about is a change of behavior. And that's my behavior is directly correlated to the results that I have in my life. So in order to have a different result, I need to have a different behavior. Now, that's the promise. It's embedded in many of these sales programs that are selling these different training programs and different training products. Yeah, and you change your behavior. Here's the behavior you need to change. Here's how you go about changing the behavior. It is really, really difficult to do. Changing behavior as an objective is bloody difficult. And if you're trying to do it by yourself, you're almost never going to succeed. Now, here's the way that this works in the human experience. How I describe something in my mind determines how I feel about it. How I feel about it generates my behavior. So it's the description, the emotion, the behavior. If I want to get a long-lasting shift in behavior, I need to change the description process, how I'm describing something to myself. Now, where this breaks down for most people in this scenario that we're describing is, they may have heard about the promise. And the promise is this shiny object out here. And what they're describing to themselves is that end result. Okay, I'm going to have that $1 million outcome, or I'm going to have that $15,000 a month stream of income coming, that sort of thing. They start to lose connection to the feeling of it. All they've got is the imagined outcome, but they don't have the experience of what it actually feels like to have had that happen. For human beings, emotion is the vibrational shift. It's the frequency that we want to be able to tap into. So with the programs that I do, as an example, every single program I work with is organized around mindset. Every program I do is organized around mindset. And my mastermind program, as an example, it runs for a year. We will spend 3 months in that mastermind program solely on the notion of awareness. 3 months on awareness. Notice what you're noticing. It's a mindset. I want to be able to get people to begin to shift their mindset about what it is that they desire, shift their mindset so that it begins to actually resonate in their body. It resonates energetically. And awareness precedes choice. An increase in awareness increases my choice-making capacity. So the next 2 months that we work with is all organized around meaning. How do what's the meaning you're making up about this stuff that you say that you'd like to have? And I won't go into the whole thing. I'm not trying to sell a mastermind here. But the idea is that, for these programs to work, you have to shift the mindset first. You can't just go into, for most people, you can't go into and just try to change the behavior. The behavior will not stick. Shift the mindset, you shift the internal energetic experience, which translates into a shift in behavior that is sustainable. It's a sustainable shift in behavior. So those sorts of things start to come into play.
I've been practicing a lot of awareness meditation. Each morning I wake up and I spend 3 minutes just sort of really clocking how I feel, and I try to do that throughout the day. Is that the type of meditation you do, Blaine, or what type of meditation do you do, Blaine?
The meditate well in the since the 70s, so this is for 50 years now. Yeah, that's changed. I mean, I've done transcendental meditation. I've done Kundalini yoga meditations, all kinds of things. Where I'm at today, is it's in the morning and in the evening, and it's really no more than about a 10-minute meditation in the morning, and it's just about stillness. That's all it's about. I'm not meditating on anything. It's just a practice of becoming still and quiet. In that stillness and quietude where I don't exist anymore. The I that is, identified as Blaine Bartlett disappears. And now I'm just kind of here. The I that lives inside that uses this body to to do whatever in the hell this body does. There's an I in here that moves to and through me. I want to tap into that I, and that I does not have time or space or physicality to it. It's just this undifferentiated I. So in that moment of quiet, that's where I go to. I want to move into that space of quiet I.
Interesting. I'd like to share what I did yesterday and would get your opinion on if there's a different approach you'd recommend me trying. So yesterday I was driving to a friend's house for dinner. I was playing some music and I went from one playlist to another, and I just couldn't find something that I was really into listening. And I take that as a sign of, like, if I go through 3 or 4 playlists, can't find a song, that means I should spend some time in silence. So I paused the music and sort of just drove in silence, and I started trying to feel how I was feeling. And I've been learning to embrace and really just feel the feelings. I was feeling, a light headache. I was feeling down. I was feeling a bit exhausted. My energy was a bit lower. I was feeling a bit lonely. And rather than trying to fight these things, I would just really feel it and embrace it. And hopefully, as I do that, my energy starts recharging and I sort of get through it, and those feelings start sort of fading as it sort of mellows out. That's the approach I've been taking. Do you have any recommendations on different things you'd recommend me to try, or is that the best approach?
I think that works great. I really do. It's where we get in trouble, I think, is it's through the phenomena of attachment. And when I mean attachment here, I mean I'm feeling down, so I get attached to feeling down. But what you're describing is you're just noticing. There's a whole domain of discernment that comes into play, and discernment there's a whole well, I won't go into the theological component of it, but yeah, when I'm working with discernment, yeah, if I can use this language, it has 4 different levels to it. One is judgment, good, bad, right, wrong. Okay. And that's very polarizing. And this is where most people live, when they're, in their experience of themselves and their body. This is a good thing to have. This is a bad thing to have. This is a right thought. This is a bad thought. I mean, that's so right, wrong, good, bad, judgment. It's polarizing, and it's not vibrationally, from a frequency perspective, someplace that I'd like to live necessarily. Yeah, judgment is not a very pleasant place to be. You move up above that, and you move out of judgment, and you just go into what I would call just general assessment. And an assessment is different than judgment here, in the sense that I'm looking here is what I'm looking at is this working for me or not working for me, which is different than is it good or bad, right or wrong. Working or not working removes judgment. It's just an assessment of applicability in a certain time frame. Is this working or not working? There's still attachment involved with it, because I'm still organizing, what I'm thinking and what I'm doing around a certain experience, working or not working. You move up a level, and now you're just in the space of just noticing without assigning meaning. It's kind of like, there's a feeling that I'm having right now. That's interesting, and I may or may not label it, but I'm just noticing. Okay, I'm having this experience right now. If I'm truly just noticing, it will pass. It will pass. It's kind of like, just notice that. Yeah, imagine yourself sitting on an island at one end of the island, and a river is flowing past the island. And in the river, there's all kinds of different things flowing towards you. And this is a meditation that I actually will use sometimes. I'm sitting on this point on an island. The river is coming at me. And in the river, there's twigs, there's leaves, there's different things that come by. And I just notice as they go by, That's interesting. Huh, there it went. And it's the noticing and then the passing, the noticing and then the passing. And at that point in time, I'm not attached really to anything. And I just literally begin to become part of the entire scenario. I'm not attached to any one element in the scenario. The level above that is actually one of where I just, yeah, I'm one with. Yeah, I've actually moved into that place where I'm the river, I'm the land, I'm the observer observing the observer. I mean, all of that sort of stuff. I'm not suggesting that's in any way, shape, or form where we need to go. Ideally, I can get to a point where, and this is in my meditation walks, where I'll get to the point of just observing, just noticing without assigning meaning. And it's in that place a lot of creativity can actually appear.
I had this philosopher named Ken Wilber on my
Yeah,
podcast,
Ken. Yeah.
and he recently came on for the second time, and I was sharing how through our first conversation, it sort of he catalyzed me to start practicing, letting the feelings flow through me. Like if I'm doing a cold shower, rather than try to fight it and push through it, feel the coldness, feel the pain, feel the fear of me not wanting to jump in, feel all those emotions. And he similarly said that the next stage is sort of getting to a point where you realize that everything is one. Everything is sort of like the headless man. How everything is sort of, and I've been thinking about it over the last month since our conversation. I haven't made any progress yet. Any tips or any hints on the jump or like, do I need to stay at the sort of awareness and so just letting things flow through me for a bit longer, or are there some little hints that I can start thinking about to get to that next level?
um, it will happen organically. I'm not sure how I could, guide you into doing that necessarily. But if you're engaged in a practice, and part of that practice is non-attachment, where you just, again, just kind of sitting on the tip of that island, watching the river of life go by and noticing the things in my life as they float by without attaching or giving significance to them. At some point, I will just pop. At some point, it just now, okay. And I don't know how to describe it. I mean, and this is when I know that I've gotten there because I don't know how to describe it. Yeah, because it's outside of time and space. It's outside of any linguistic identifiers. It doesn't lend itself to labeling. I just now am here. I am just now here. And it's not I, not this thing. I. It's a different I that is now here. It's a different I that is now here.
I heard this quote from, I think it was Ram Dass. He talked about how when you get into that observing state of mind and just observing your feelings and observing your thoughts, you then realize that everyone's observer is the same thing. And I thought of that as you were talking about how it's just I. It's not your I, but it's another I. And and that sort of the observing part of me is the same observer that everyone else has, and
Yep.
that's God.
Yeah, you can use that word. Yeah. Universe, source, soul. I mean, there's a lot of different labels that we want to put on it, but that's essentially what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about. Everything is a differentiated aspect of a single source. That would be one way to think about it. And yeah, source, God, spirit, universe moves to and through me, and it animates me. It moves to, through, and the screen. The screen vibrates. This screen has a frequency. Source is moving through this screen. It animates it. It's a differentiated aspect of the same source in a very discrete way. It's differentiated in a very discrete way. You and I are discrete manifestations, unique discrete manifestations of a unified source. When I'm actually interacting with somebody, there's nobody out there but me. I'm always interacting with aspects of myself in some way, shape, or form, which makes life a hoot. It really makes life a hoot. It's kind of like, wow, that's an interesting, yeah. I have, if, yeah, it's kind of like, huh, You're doing it that way. That's interesting that you would do it that way. That part of me that's now sitting in Sydney, taking notes. That's interesting that you would do that way, and they would invite this part of you, quote unquote, uh, to be speaking with you in this way. It's all the same whole, and it's a holographic representation. So, yeah, you show up differently than I show up. Now, that's all esoteric as hell.
I remember listening somewhere, but the quote that you just reminded me of, Blaine, was, loving someone, loving this person that you're talking to is loving parts of yourself.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. Yeah. When I say I love you, who's the I that is actually being addressed? Who is the I that is speaking, and who is the I that I'm referencing?
I love you. So you talk about the I.
If we look at it from an egoic perspective, yeah, it's Andy saying that he loves whoever out there. But if we look at it from more of a spiritual perspective, it's Source saying, I love that aspect of Source that's represented in that other manifestation, that other form. I love that tree. I love that sunset. Who's the I that is actually captured by that sunset? Well, my eyes are doing it. Yeah, so I've got an experience, but the I that is using my body to capture this experience is the one that's truly being touched.
Something I've been thinking about is, I often give people compliments, and a close friend, sort of said that I might do it in a sort of self-deprecating way where, I might see a friend, Simon, like, I can't believe you ran 10 kilometers with zero training. That's so freaking amazing. Or like, I can't believe that, Han, you moved to Singapore, and you're doing this business and you're so good at social media. Like, I can't believe you grew 500,000 followers in like a few months. That's so freaking amazing. And my friend is like, Andy, like, you say things, but like, you're pretty cool yourself. And I didn't notice that because in my mind, I'm like giving people compliments, but at the same time, I'm fully aware that I could probably achieve the same thing if I was in the same circumstance and if I put my mind to it. So by me sort of telling person like, hey, like, Sonny, you have really good freaking memory, and I see that he has good memory because I know what it's like to have good memory and good recall. So I thought of that when you just shared that.
Yeah, I will never notice something in another unless it's recognized as being a part of my own experience. Yeah. I will never get upset with another unless there's a part of me that gets, it's a part of me that's being upset. It's not anything to do with the other person. So when I say I love you, there's qualities that you're exhibiting that are resident in me that I'm appreciating. So there's, that's which again, I'm going to come back to compassionate capitalism. That's where connection of that kind begins to come into play. When I say I love my customer, when I say I love my suppliers, there's something there that says they are not separate from me. They are actually a part of who we as a company or a brand are, and they're just, yeah, showing up in a different way.
On the other side of the coin, when communicating with my mum, and my mum loves me dearly, and I don't know if it's coming from me, but when I hear her say things such as, Andy, you should consider, getting a job. So and so is making 200K. Hey, you should sell your car because it's too big, and you should downgrade into something that I can drive. Or when she's like, like, thank you for the dinner. Like, now you can put it under the business and write it off. So these little comments, and it definitely gets to me. What does that say about me? Like, am I, yeah.
This goes right back to the very beginning of our conversation. You're 25. You have a life experience that is centered around 25-year-oldness, which has to do with, family connections, the individuation that kind of occurs there. A large part of the young adult experience, and this by young adult, I'm talking about, generally 18 to about 30, right in that framework, is organized around other people's expectations about who we are supposed to be and how we are supposed to be. And Yeah, if we're really smart, we start moving away from being influenced by that, and we start beginning to define for ourselves, what does it mean to be successful for me? Yeah, it may not involve money. It may not involve a big car. It may not involve, you kind of fill in the blank, which is where the question of what would I love? What do I love starts to come into play. I mean, Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss, that sort of a thing. But it's more than that. It's more than just a cliche sort of a thing. And there are stages of life that people go through. Make no mistake about it. The 20s is about self-discovery and whatnot. Yeah, the 30s, to 40s is about empire building, and this is primarily for gender related here, but for people that are professionals, they're empire building. They're building their lives, and that's 30 to 40-ish. Yeah, yeah, 40 on up until about 60, you start looking at and you start becoming more and more concerned with legacy. Yeah, I've built this empire. Now, how do I hand it off? How do I curate it? That sort of thing. So values begin to shift. What you're orienting around begin to shift. But if you haven't taken the time to really define for yourself, what does it mean to me to be successful in life? Then I end up in my 50s looking back going, I think I missed something. I checked all the boxes about what other people said I was supposed to be and do, but I don't feel like I thought I would feel. And what's missing is that kernel, that source of soul, that access to that the voice of the soul that says, this is you. And you get to express yourself in this way. Each one of us is so unbelievably unique. There is nobody has ever lived or ever will live that has the same, the same proclivity that we do, the same understanding of life in the way that we understand it. Nobody ever has or will. We are unbelievably unique in that regard. It'll never be duplicated. So how do I express that? My definition of success will be different than my mother's. I will guarantee it. Now, she will try very hard to influence it, but that's just the nature of the beast.
Ironically, me getting clarity around what I'm looking for in a partner or what I'm looking for in a friend, and me sort of being able to sort of define it and know, sort of have a gist of what I'm looking for, and I know, I then realized that I don't have it in my life as of yet. As I was sort of having dinner with my friends last night, ironically, my clarity led to clearer differences, which then led to me feeling alienated, which led to me driving home feeling a bit lonely. And me realizing that the more I define what I want, the more I get clarity on who Andy is and who and what he wants, the more defined the differences will be with others,
Mm-hmm.
and the stronger sense of alienation because everyone's trying to justify their own beliefs and like Andy, like, why don't you date that girl? Like you need to give it a try. How will you know if you don't try? But I just know. And I can't, maybe it's my fault because I'm struggling to articulate it in a way where my friends can understand where I'm coming from. I don't know if maybe I went from knowing what I want, and that's a different beast, to being able to define what I want and articulate it. Any thoughts there, Blaine?
Yeah, your pool of friends will change over time, as particularly if you're growing. If you're growing, your pool of friends will change over time, and the tendency with a lot of people is to want to keep anybody in our lives. We want to keep them in a certain place. We want them to be like this because this is how I know to interact with you. But if you start changing, the differences will start to come into play here. You'll start noticing that there are differences. I mean, there are friends in my life that I have very little contact with anymore, not because anything was broken, but just because I grew in a different way. I grew in a different direction. And it was just time for that to move. It was time for that to move. And new things came in, new people came in. The new people that are in my life right now, and I'm very discriminating about who I who I spend a lot of time with. They are people that would never have shown up in my life, in my 20s. They never would have even thought about interacting because I wasn't there. I attract who I am. I attract who I am. Or more precisely, I attract who I'm being. So as you start to be differently, you will begin to attract differently.
One thing that had me a bit confused was that I had this preconceived expectation or thought that, successful people, mentors, that be able to understand what I'm feeling. Well, I guess the scenario was I had a mentor that gives me so much amazing advice when it comes to business, making money, investments, sort of life advice. But I remember coming to him one day, and I was like, hey, like mentor, like, do you ever feel lonely? Like, do you ever feel, down and out?
Mhm.
And his response was like, no, not really. And I was like, what? And then I was like, aren't there days where you sort of wake up and you sort of feel just tired and not motivated? Like, what do you do on those days? And he jokingly said, I find happiness at the bottom of a alcohol bottle. He said that jokingly, but I think maybe there was a sense of truth somewhere there. So I was so confused how like he's so much more experienced than me in life and in business, but then there's a whole another sector where we just didn't connect at all, and I couldn't get the help I was looking for spiritually. But then there's people who I can get a lot of help spiritually, but when it comes to like, hey, like I'm out of money, what do I do? They'll be unable to help me with that. And then I'm like, there's not a ladder that I can climb where there's going to be more people that can help me out as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what do you do with that? This is where awareness comes in. Yeah. You just notice, oh, okay, that's interesting. I've got this. I've got this. What do I make up about that? See, here's the thing about, because we're continuously making assessments in our mind. And this is where I go back to the whole discernment area. Assessments either close or open the door to possibilities. Every assessment will close the door and it will open a different door. So if my assessments are typically moving in one direction consistently, I'm going to be closing a lot of opportunity doors in another direction. So I want to notice what assessments I'm making. Are they serving me? And this moves me up to that next level. Is this working or not working? So you notice the assessments. Now, in terms of spiritual development as well as professional development, they are not incompatible. But the one thing that needs to happen is an understanding that action is important. You have to take action. So in the business side of it, every day I'm doing something, even when I don't know what the hell I'm doing something that I intend to be moving towards that outcome that I say I'd like to have happen.
In your circle, Blaine, your tight circle of friends and peers, are the people in your circle able to serve all the different aspects of you? Or do you have each person that serves a specific side of Blaine and you sort of Frankenstein a group that ends up being Blaine if they're all combined?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is I've got something like that, but a lot of it's imaginary. And what I mean by imaginary, I've got a board of directors, if you will, that I've imagined for myself. And it's people that either I've known personally or I know of. So, I mean, I use Apple as an example in a lot of the business conversations I have. On my board of directors, I've got Steve Jobs. So, how would Steve approach this issue that I'm dealing with? And I know enough about him that I have got a sense of how he would probably do something. So I mean, it's imaginary. All life is imagined. All life is imagined. So I don't limit myself by having real people. I want to imagine people that really, I think, can add to what it is that I'm trying to do. So, on the professional side, you don't have to have a real life mentor, quote unquote. Pick a couple of folks that you think are extraordinarily effective in that domain, and then and this is where it gets to be kind of fun. Is you have a meeting, you call a board of advisor meeting, and you've got a kitchen table or a table that you sit at. Assign a seat to each one of those people, and then you present the agenda. Okay. And then you literally lean over and say, okay, Steve, what's your thoughts on this? And you get up out of your chair and you go sit in the chair that Steve is sitting in, and you speak as if you were Steve. Now, this is imagined. This is all imaginal. But what happens with this, how I describe something determines how I feel about it. How I feel about it generates behavior. Because you can step into that imagined persona, and there's nobody out there but me anyway. Yeah. So I'm stepping into a part of an aspect of me that already has existed on this planet. So I speak as if that person was in the room and I listen to what he or she has to say. And then I go, okay, Warren, what do you think? And then you jump up and I go sit in Warren's seat, Warren Buffett here. How do you think I'd do this? Well, I don't know. I mean, now I don't know Warren well enough to be able to actually, use him on my board of advisors, but that's kind of how I do it. It's playful, and I don't do it all the time. Yeah, but it's served me very, very well. When I was developing my business, and it's very cost effective.
You mentioned Steve Jobs. Is it through the books and biographies you've read of Steve Jobs, or did you know Steve Jobs?
Oh, I met him once, but I knew people that knew him very well, and I've worked with them a lot. And so I've got a pretty good third-hand understanding of him. Yeah, and I've read the biographies and I've seen the movies and that kind of stuff.
What was your one in-person interaction like with Steve, Blaine?
Oh, it wasn't necessarily an interaction. It was at a large meeting, but yeah, hi Steve, yeah, sort of a deal. Yeah, years and years and years ago.
Talking to all your peers that personally worked with Steve, what was your main takeaway on the gist of Steve that maybe the public and the movies don't show?
Well, I think a lot of what's been written about him and whatnot has actually captured him fairly well. But one of the things that everybody spoke about was his unbelievable focus. And this is true, I think, of most successful entrepreneurs. Yeah, Elon Musk is a great example of this as well. Bill Gates, just Warren Buffett, focus, just almost myopic focus on an issue, yeah, until it was resolved. Nikola Tesla, the same sort of a thing. Yeah, Tesla was famous for saying something one time that I absolutely loved, because he was asked how he actually, yeah, because he was a prolific inventor. And he said he would never start building something until in his mind he had seen it completely assembled. Every screw, every nut, every bolt, every circuit, he saw it and imagined it vividly as being completed. Then he would begin assembly. He never started a project in that sense until he could envision, and that's the focus. How I describe it, he would feel it as done. And then the behavior was just, well, okay, it's already done. Let's just get it done. That kind of focus. It's rare, but Jobs had it. Gates has it. These are the kind of, yeah, Elon Musk has it. I mean, this is kind of what, now he gets distracted a lot, but that's another story entirely.
How do you go about focusing? For example, one of your main focus right now, Blaine, is pushing the compassion capitalist book. There's so many things you can do. You could do more podcasts. You can create content marketing. You could focus on getting Amazon reviews. Is doing all those things focused because it all is focused on pushing the book, or is that itself not focused because it's three different things?
The book is just the book. It's the concept of compassionate capitalism that I'm focused on. So um, the modality that I organize around is teaching, and this would be an example of that. But whether it's a podcast, whether it's a webinar, whether it's an article, whether it's a YouTube short or an Instagram reel, I mean, these are all ways that I go about facilitating getting the message out. Now, that's a concept, so focused on getting a concept out, which is a little different than getting a product out, because a product you're going to have more discrete material and resource components that kind of come into play. So a concept is a little bit more abstract. So the focus on a concept, I keep it in front of me. yeah, and interactions that I do. Yeah, and it shows up in my behavior. It shows up in how I work with wait staff when I'm at a restaurant. Is there compassion involved in my interaction with them? So, or the hospital staff when we're, at the hospital with my wife. Yeah, all sorts of different things.
When you just talked about how your current sort of why and purpose is sort of pushing out the concept of compassion, capitalism, something I just realized is that, during my conversation with you or Ken Wilber, something that I didn't talk about was like purpose, why. Like, do people have unique purpose, and why is that something you should look for? And I guess you've sort of found it at your current chapter where your current why is pushing this concept out. But I guess, like me and many others, we just feel like walking on this floating rock. But then Ken doesn't talk about purpose or why, or maybe I haven't asked him about it.
I wrestled with that one for a number of years, actually a couple of decades. Just what's my purpose in life? What's my purpose in life? Thinking that it was out there someplace and I had to go find it. It's not out there someplace. I think, this is where I've landed. I think it's impossible for people to not live and express their purpose. They may not know that they're doing it at any given point in time, but when they are fully alive, they are by definition expressing their purpose in life. When they're fully alive, when they have the experience of being fully alive, they are doing what their purpose is calling on them to do. Now, that being said, Simon Sinek, talks about the why. You get the why out there. I think that there's a level below why that comes into play for me, and it has to do with a question that I ask of all of my clients when I'm working with them: for the sake of what are you doing this? For the sake of what? Which is different than why. Why tends to be omnidirectional because you can answer it in all kinds of funky ways. What's your why? Well, okay. For the sake of what are you doing this? All of a sudden, you've got a laser focus on it. For the sake of what are you taking that action? For the sake of what? So the for the sake of what speaks to what's important to me. What's important in this relationship? What's important in this transaction? For the sake of what? And the more I ask that question, the deeper I go. And at some point in time, voila, there's something that happens there that you kind of go, that's what I'm about in life. That's what I'm about in life. For the sake of what do I breathe? For the sake of what do I pick up the phone? For the sake of what do I reach out and set up an interview? For the sake of what?
And then,
And you're the only one that can answer that for yourself.
do you often go through that exercise yourself, Blaine? Like, I'm trying to think back, like, I guess I haven't thought about this question for the last few months because I've been just really focused in staying in the eternal now, staying in the present. And for some reason, that feels more tangible. It's something I can do. I can stay here. I can stay present. And I guess what you just brought light is maybe by doing that, my body would move with my purpose, and I might not even know what my purpose is, but it's moving in a direction somehow. But then now I'm thinking, but then I don't really have like a North Star to guide it towards. Is that necessarily bad? Or if I focus in the now, it would on its own go to the North Star?
The for the sake of what provides a direction. It doesn't necessarily, I wouldn't call it a North Star because a North Star is pretty discrete. Yeah. But if I know that my direction is west, as an example, uh, that gives me a lot of latitude to express and discover and explore. But if my direction is predicated on a specific spot, that's pretty limiting because anytime I am not, on that plumb line or on that vector, I will feel like a failure. But if I know that, the for the sake of what is to go west, okay, yeah, I mean, just metaphorically here, that gives me, yeah, a whole lot of room to move. And as I, start getting closer to the end of my life, then it starts looking a little bit more discreet. It's kind of like, and this is where, things start showing up in different ways. See, you're on a journey right now, Andy, and it's an exciting journey. And yeah, at 25, I mean, you're, maybe 8 years into the exploration on this, and you got a whole lot of road in front of you, which is exciting as hell. It really is.
One thing I was asked when I was at church last week, I think they're like, so what do you believe in, Andy? Like, what's your beliefs? And I've often been asked this question and I don't really have an answer, but my default answer has been, I believe in, being kind. I believe in trying to make other people feel seen. I believe in trying to be present and grateful. I believe in that, karma. You do good, good comes around if you do bad. And I also believe that the universe is sort of like this ocean that's sort of guiding you through life and it wants you to win. It doesn't want you to sort of have a tough life. And if you listen to it, you can sort of flow through life. And that's been my fluffy answer. And the reason I thought about it was you sort of just shared about how that exercise gives you like a north southwest direction. And I think my answer on what I believe in might be a north southwest answer. But I guess, yeah, if someone were to ask you, Blaine, what do you believe in? What's your answer?
What do I believe in? Uh, I believe that, life is good. I mean, that's at the end of the day, I believe that life is good in all of its manifestations. And even what most people would describe as being a bad thing, every bad thing that has ever, quote unquote, bad thing that has ever happened to me in life, there's always been good that's come out of it. There's always been something that has benefited either me or other people, in a way that wouldn't have happened if that bad thing hadn't occurred. This is where, when you start moving beyond good, bad, right, and wrong, you begin to see the world and see life as a much more generative possibility.
With all your life experience, Blaine, after sort of chatting with me, is there a question that you would recommend me to ask you? And then you could also answer that question. But since, I have blind spots and I don't yet have that experience, I don't know that's a question I should ask. Yeah. Would you have a question that you would recommend me to ask that I might not be able to see at the moment?
Nothing is coming to mind right now. You've done a pretty good job here, I think, of asking some very interesting questions. I think we've had a far-reaching conversation. It's covered a lot of territory. In terms of a question, yeah, no, nothing is immediately coming to mind, Andy. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate that you took 30 seconds to really think about it. I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate this conversation. I really do. And I do need to begin to close it off. I've got a couple of errands that I need to run before some of the stores around here close.
Thank you, Blaine. Last two questions we wrap up these podcasts with. Question one, any recent discoveries that you've implemented to your day-to-day life, Blaine?
Recent discoveries. Actually, there is one. This little protein ball. I discovered this at a juice shop, and it is just filled with all kinds of protein and goodies and dates and all kinds of stuff. So this has become a daily thing for me. We stop on the way back from the hospital every day, and we pick up a couple of these, and so I'm implementing this into my life right now. It gives me a little bit of joy.
Do you snack on it? Do you routinely eat it for breakfast?
No, just snack on it. Just snack on it.
I love that. And the last question is, I think you might have already answered, but any personal goals or focus for the next 6 months? I know that you've been really focused on pushing out the concept of sort of compassionate capitalism. You've been focused on your wife's health. Any personal goals for the next 6 months?
Yeah, for the next 6 months, one of the things that I want to pay particular attention to is quality of life, particularly quality of my relationship with my wife as she begins her healing journey. I want us to travel more. I want us to do some things that we've been putting off and holding off on doing. So just spending more time with her uh, is something that I want to be particularly mindful of.
I love that, Blaine. Blaine, where can our audience get more of you?
BlaineBartlett.com is the my personal website. My company website, which is where Compassionate Capitalism lives, is Avatar, AVATAR, resources.com, avatarresources.com, and BlaineBartlett.com. And then I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, uh, yeah, all the regular places. Yeah, my YouTube channel, I got a podcast that's we're coming up on our 200th episode. So it's The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. And yeah, people can certainly subscribe to that. And I've got some pretty interesting guests. on that show, and it's a fun show to do.
Thank you so much for your time, Blaine. I know we had a long conversation. We hit so many different topics. I had no idea where this podcast was going to go when my friends asked, hey, like, tell us about the guest tomorrow. I was like, I'm not too sure where I'll go, but, you know, I'm pretty excited to just dig into Blaine's life and see where the conversation takes. And this has definitely, I'm very, very happy with this conversation. So I really appreciate your time, Blaine. You know, I feel your wealth of experience. You've been doing this for so long, and we've only scratched the tip of the iceberg, I know for sure. But yeah, I learned so much. You made me feel so seen and heard, and there was so much care and compassion with this conversation, and I really appreciate that.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Don't be a stranger. Let me know when this gets ready to be broadcast, and I'll send it out to my social media, and we'll get some eyes on it.
I will. Guys, if you made it this far into the podcast, hopefully you guys got some value. Please let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys next week on another episode. Peace.